he ended, Rabbi Eitan came to me and said, "We have to bring him again." I said, I know, we do. So we're very excited that you guys are here to get to hear him speak. He spoke to the middle school students today, and it was fantastic. So he'll share some of his insight, and we're just really grateful to see so many parents here who are willing to partner with us in this wonderful journey of raising all of these beautiful children. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all so much for coming. I know that it's not an easy thing to get out on a random weeknight. People's lives are very busy. So thank you all for being here. I think it really shows and expresses the level of commitment you have to raising your family in a wholesome and growing way, which really is the most important thing. It's all we can do is try our best, and everything else is extremely difficult, and we have to pray. But we try our best, and showing up to something like this really is doing the effort and the commitment, the dedication that we can. Thank you so much to the guests for opening your home to us and hosting, and it was really fun for me to show up here, learning that we actually have a close connection, so it feels great to be here. Thank you to Ray Sender and to Oro, to everyone for making this happen and giving me the opportunity to speak with you and share some thoughts. I had an amazing day today, meeting with many of your children and having the opportunity to engage with them in all sorts of interesting conversations, and we had so much dialogue and kind of back and forth, and it was really kind of mind-opening to engage with young people, but about really substantive and deep topics. I want to talk to you about a topic that I think is so important, and something that I'm sure you are all already doing an amazing job at. And sometimes these types of talks are, unfortunately, or fortunately, but in some senses a little bit of a shame, because it's oftentimes ends up being preaching to the choir. The people that show up to these types of things are the ones who are usually already doing a better job. So I'm really here just to, as we say, be mechazik, right? To continue giving strength and encouragement to all the things I'm sure you all are already doing. I certainly can say that as a parent myself, I always feel really foolish speaking about parenting, because I can talk about it, I can share with you some of the research, some of the data, some of the things I've seen, and I know that, if you come to my house and look at what's going on, I don't know if it looks anything like I'm talking about, and I'm struggling, and it's extremely difficult, and parenting is really, really, really hard. I certainly don't have any answers, and I certainly don't know what I'm talking about, but I can try and share just some thoughts and some of the findings and maybe some perspective. I read a story a bit ago about a group of soldiers in the Israeli army. I don't know the exact details of the story, but I found it very moving and very thought-provoking. The story was somewhat to the effect of that there was a group of soldiers in a unit that there was some raffle. For some reason, someone had donated a prize that they were giving to this unit for something they had done or just to give them strength. And they had, I don't know exactly, let's say it was like a $10,000 prize. One person was going to win it. And they were all supposed to write their name on a raffle ticket and put it into a hat, let's say, and they were going to pick the winner. And one person thought to himself, it's interesting, there's one guy in the unit who just went through a very, very difficult family situation that I know about, and we kind of all know that he went through something very tough. And I'm gonna write his name on the ticket, on my ticket too. So he has a double, an extra chance at winning. So he writes the other guy's name on his own ticket and he sticks it into the hat. And lo and behold, this guy wins. He wins the cash prize. And the individual who had wrote the guy's name on his own ticket was so excited, he was so happy about it, and he went to look at the tickets, just kind of out of curiosity. I don't know what compelled him to do it, but he went to look at the tickets, and he saw that actually he wasn't the only one who thought of that. Every single ticket said this guy's name on it, which I thought was such a beautiful story. But then it also kind of made me a little bit sad, because I thought that's so nice. And then it made me wonder, am I raising my kids in a way that they would think to do that? And are we collectively raising our kids in a way that they would think to do that? I think there's something special about being in a unit together in the army that kind of fosters that. And there's something, maybe very selfless about that kind of environment. But are we raising kids in a way that that's what they would do? Because to me, that's the goal. Like, what's the goal? Like, what do we want to see our kids do? So we have a lot of goals. We want them to get into a good college. We We want them to have good, meaningful relationships, find someone to spend their life with. We have a lot of goals. To me, when I heard that story, it was a bit of a paradigm shift. It was like, what's my goal in parenting? My goal is that I can feel confident that if my son or daughter are in a situation like that, they would think to do something like that. And the question is, how do we get there? Because it's not so simple. By nature, kids can be very self-absorbed. Our culture can create a lot more of that self-absorption. There's a lot going on that feeds and directs things in the opposite direction of that story. So how do we get there? How do we raise altruistic kids? Because that's really the goal. That's the word. How do we raise altruistic kids to become altruistic adults? So there's a book that I found. Actually, I got to this because in the forward of my book, I had the opportunity, the privilege of having Dr. David Pelkovitz, if anybody knows that name, tremendous individual, really a very special and holy person. So he wrote a forward to my book. And in his forward, he quotes a book that I was so intrigued about. So I went and got it, tried to read it. I would recommend it to you, but it's a very dense, kind of data-filled book. So I tried to parse through it for you, and I'm going to share with you the findings that are kind of relatable. The book is called The Altruistic Personality. It's written by a couple, Doctors Sam and Pearl Oliner, O-L-I-N-E-R. I recommend looking up their research. They were righteous Gentiles who, during the Holocaust, risked their lives to save Jews. And they got curious after the war. They were curious, what made us do it and others didn't? And what made the people like us who decided to risk their lives to save other people? Is there any pattern? Is there any predictable kind of ingredient that led to the fact that some people decided to be altruistic, risk their lives, and save someone else, and others kind of either stood by as innocent, as passive bystanders, or some people actually even became enablers? What separated the bystanders and enablers from those who were rescuers? What separated them? So they embarked on a journey of doing as much research as they could about the backgrounds, the childhood that led up to the development of those who became rescuers versus those who didn't. And they actually found really interesting data. They found that on a lot of the things you would expect to be the determining factor, there was no predictable power to it. They were not the determining factors. Religion didn't matter. Socioeconomic status didn't matter. Beliefs about morality didn't matter. None of those things were predicting factors in someone deciding to be altruistic and be a rescuer, and someone deciding to not be so. But they found that there are 5 things that were common amongst those who became rescuers. 5 things in the childhood of those who became rescuers that set them apart from those who didn't. So those 5 things are really what we're looking for if our goal is for our children to become altruistic members of society. So I want to share with you what those 5 things are. They're pretty amazing. The first is that they found that in the families of non-rescuers, let's call them, the childhood environment and experience in their home was such that the dominant priority, the dominant table talk, the dominant value in the family culture was economic competence. To be financially successful, to be financially self-sufficient. That was the dominating value in the homes of those who did not become the rescuers. The homes that became rescuers, financial success mattered, it was a value, but it wasn't the dominating top priority of what we talk about, of what we set our goals on, what we're focused on, what our vision for you is. That wasn't the culture that filled the air in the homes of those who became altruistic. I think this is a very profound point, and I think maybe we can kind of expand it to not just be about what they call economic competence or financial success, but we can expand it in a way that goes a little bit beyond that. in that there's a certain way of prioritizing or focusing on luxuries, pleasures, materialism, and indulgence, which are all wonderful things. But focusing on those things as what life's about versus life is about something else. Those things are all wonderful things to also be part of the picture. And that creates a different environment for these children as they grow up and the values that they start to absorb in themselves. I think that any one of us already knows what I just said, and nobody would say, if you stop them, put them against the wall and ask them, what's the most important thing to you? Like, the most important thing about life. What's life about? I don't think too many people would say money, indulgence. Like, I don't think that's what people would say. But the question is, even if it's not what we would say intellectually, what does our lived experience communicate to those around us about what we actually care about? A number of years ago, I was part of a fellowship called the Wexner Graduate Fellowship. If anyone's familiar with what that is. So it takes a cohort every year. It actually stopped, but they went for like 30-something years. They took a cohort every year of 20 or so kind of Jewish, I guess, up-and-coming leaders as they saw fit from across the spectrum of different Jewish denominations. And they brought them together in a cohort and had yearly seminars, and they brought us all together in different ways of that nature. So I remember the first time we got together. So it was me together with 20 other individuals that I had just met from very diverse backgrounds and different sets of values. And the guy, his name was Marty Linsky. I still remember this as one of the most meaningful. It was the first interaction in this fellowship, and I still think it was the most meaningful one. He said, I want you all to tell me, what do you value most? What are you here because you're passionate about, that the fellowship, that the Wexner Foundation saw that you care about, and therefore they wanted to bring you in? What do you care about? So everyone gave different answers, and again, very, very wide-ranging answers of what they cared about. Some people, it was, Jewish continuity, it was the state of Israel, it was equality, it was, Torah study, whatever it was, all sorts of different things, etc. And he wrote them all down. He said, okay, great, so these are the things you care about. Let me ask you a question. If an alien was looking in, watching your life, without hearing you say what it is that you care about, what you're passionate about, they couldn't hear you talk about your passion. They just watched the way you lived. Would they know that this is the thing you say your life revolves around? Would the alien know that? Because if the answer is no, then it's not really your passion. Because we can say what we care about, but what do we actually communicate through our actions, through our emotions and excitement? And I'll explain more what I mean by that in a second. Now, the thing is, there are no aliens watching our life to tell us that, except that there are. Because the aliens are our children. He didn't say that part. That's me adding now, like 15 years later. What your children really care about, sorry to say this, means most likely that's what they see you really caring about. Now, in your mind, you might have a very different set of values. But what your life speaks to them, what do they see you get excited about? When you get animated, what are you animated about? When you're excited about something or you're distraught about something, what are you distraught about? What are you animated and excited about? That speaks so loudly to our kids. When they see that we're excited about something material, or we're distraught about something material not working out, but when it comes to something ethical or moral, we kind of maybe have opinions, but our body doesn't speak the same kind of passion. Well, they just learned what we're passionate about. And what we're intellectually we care about, but do we really care about it? They're the aliens. They pick up on what's actually happening inside of us. So nobody would say that they care more about, going back to the Allner's study, they care more about economic competence than being a good person. But on this infographic, if you have a chance to take one of these and take a look at it, it's kind of jarring. Harvard did a study a number of years ago that speaks to exactly this point about the aliens in our children. Because Harvard found, they did a study of a few thousand kids, school-age kids, and they asked them, what do your parents care more about? How you did on your test in school that day, or how you treated people in your school that day? And I forgot the exact numbers, you can look, but it's like 91% said they care more about how I did on my test. Now they asked the parents, they did a study of the parents of those kids. So it wasn't even like, trying to match up. They did a study of the parents of those kids, and they asked them, what do you care more about? How your kid does on a test, or how they treat people in school? And it was like 89% said, I care more about how they treat people. So what happened? Yeah, because if anybody's asked the question, what do you care more about? Of course they're going to say, I care more about how we treat people. But what question do you ask your kids when they get home from school?
How was your test?
How was your test? Can I see your report?
Yes.
Right? That's the question they're asked. So what do they learn? Oh, my parent cares about my grades. How many times do we ask our kids, were you nice to someone today in school? What were your interactions with your friends like? Or maybe even better, what were your interactions with the kids who aren't your friends like? Did you do something nice for someone today? Like I said in the beginning, I am very far from a great parent, but I started after seeing this study, I started trying to do that. I ask my kids now, not every day, because then it doesn't, that's not good either, right? But I try to be careful to ask my kids on some consistent basis when I see them after school. How was your day? Anything interesting happen? Whatever it is. First of all, even just having that conversation, asking questions, that's already something, which we'll get back to in a little bit. But then I try to ask, were you nice to someone today? Did you do something to try and help somebody today? Did you try to help someone who wasn't your friend? And just try to ask them these questions. Because that's how they learn what we actually care about. Because we don't want our kids, when all of us deep down really care more about the real things, we don't want 91% of our kids thinking we care more about the test grade than how they treat people. But unless we really revamp our lived experience to match what we theoretically believe, that's the impression they get from us. There's a pasuk, a verse that says, Ish lefi mahalalo, which means on the simple level that each person can be praised for something specific. Each person has a different thing they can be praised for. There's another reading of those words that says, each person is known by what they praise. Your children know you, the real you that they experience is based on what you praise, what you get excited about, what you get distraught about, what you show emotion about. That's what they really pick up on. That's the first thing the Allner's found in their study of how children become altruistic versus not. Okay? That's number one. Number two, I think is really interesting. They said that they found in this study that there are some people who focus on equity in their parenting, meaning that they teach their kids about things being fair. Right? That things should be fair, and that they should treat people fairly. Right? Then there are some people who kind of give an impression to their kids of entitlement, which is even more problematic. But even equity, which we would think is a good thing, equity is a good value, but what they found is that the people who taught the concept of equity to their children did not raise altruistic children. Because being fair is actually not altruism. Being fair is good. It's decent, it's better than entitlement, but it's actually not altruism. Those who became altruistic to the max were from families that focused on kindness and care, even more than equity. That even when it's not fair, that it's not just about things being fair or being equitable, but actually trying to tip the scales in the direction of kindness, of care, of being a caring person, not just an honest or fair or morally decent person. There's a story, I actually shared this with one of the groups of students today, I forgot which one it was, but there's a story, it's kind of anecdotal, it's not as kind of hard data like the Allers study, but there was a Rebbe pre-war that you may have heard of, the Piazetzner Rebbe. It's known as the Eish Kodesh also, the Warsaw Ghetto Rebbe, people refer to him as. And they say, and his Hasidus, his group of students, was mostly wiped out, as was pretty much everyone in the area that they lived. He was in the Warsaw Ghetto at a point. But they said that there seemed to have been a disproportionate amount of his students that survived the war, relative to other groups from that same area. And they wanted to try and figure out how that happened or why that happened. Why would he have had more students that survived than others? So there's no way to know for sure. But they went around, I don't know exactly who this was, but went around and tried to find as many living students as possible and ask them questions about their experience leading up right before they were taken by the Nazis, and try to find out a little bit more information about what was going on. And they started hearing the same story from everyone they asked. They said, all these students said, that just as we were about to be rounded up and taken from our homes and from our families and everything, our Rebbe, that's the Rebbe, was running around frantically, from family to family, from home to home, to as many people as he could get to. And he ran to each of us quickly, because he only had a second. And he wanted to get as many people as possible. He ran to each of us, and he came over to each of us, and he grabbed us by the shoulders, and he looked at us in the eyes, and he said, wherever they take you, do chesed. And that was it. And he ran to the next person and said the same thing again. And the same, wherever they take you, do chesed. And these students said they felt that that's what gave them life. Because we know now in neuroscience how it works in the brain, but we know spiritually from our tradition, from many, many teachings, that the greatest source of our own life and vitality comes from doing kindness for other people. The Lubavitcher Rebbe once received a letter where somebody was talking to him about feeling very down, feeling very depressed. And they wrote this letter, Dear Rebbe, I'm having a very hard time. I'm feeling very disconnected. I'm feeling very low about things. I'm feeling, and going on and on. And the Rebbe wrote back the most incredible letter without even writing a single word. He took his pen and he circled the word I at the beginning of every sentence, and he sent it back to the person. My primary job is not as a teacher in a school, but as a therapist. I have a small practice back in Chicago, and there was a woman I was working with not so long ago that really kind of, to me, it struck this chord, because she was telling me that she's had a lifelong struggle with depression, kind of ups and downs, and she, a few years ago, found her way into being part of the Chevra Kadisha. And she said that since she joined the Chevra Kadisha, she still has some level of struggle with the depression, but it's completely different. Because she has such a sense of fulfillment from doing that act of chesed, that act of kindness that no one even knows about, because of course it's anonymous, secret. And she has such a fulfillment from that it helped her depression more than any of, I'm pro-therapy, I'm a therapist, but it helped her depression more than any therapy she had been in for all those years of her life, more than any of the antidepressant SSRI medications that she had tried, this cocktail and that cocktail. She joined the Chevra Kadisha not even for that purpose, but she found that 75% of her depression had lifted. And she was doing much better. She came in, I hadn't seen her in a while. She came in for a session after, we hadn't been meeting regularly. She came in for a session because she had found out recently that she was pregnant. And when a woman's pregnant, they're not allowed to do taharas. They're not allowed to do the work of the Chevra Kadisha. And she felt her depression setting back in. We need to find a way to communicate to our kids that the greatest source of happiness we can find is in doing kindness for others. Yes, we want to focus on being fair and equitable, and we want to make sure that each of us is getting filled up also. It's not about becoming overly a martyr to kindness in a way that we're empty ourselves. But the thing that fills us up most, we need to communicate, and this goes back to the first point. How do we embody the reality for our kids to see that our greatest joy is when we have the opportunity not to receive but to give? When we have the opportunity to go out of our way for someone, to do something for someone, that brings us more joy than any vacation we go on, any new car we have, any I recently had, this is not something I ever really get to do, I recently had some fluke opportunity that someone was going to take me to sit courtside at a Bulls game, which I was like, I love sports, I was so excited about. But it's like, what does it mean? I think we should all be normal and be excited about things like that. I'm not saying we should start to, but I was trying to just be like conscious a little bit. Like, what does it mean if I'm like so excited, so pumped up about this opportunity? Like, is that the most exciting thing in life for my kids to see that that's what I'm the most excited for? I was still more excited about that than most things, but to have some level of conscientiousness around it, right? So that's the second thing they found is the focus not on equity, but the focus on care, on kindness. The third thing they found is that the families that raised the children that became the rescuers, that became the altruistic adults, versus those that were the bystanders or enablers, were families where the parents made sure to focus on what the Alleners call an internal locus of control, versus what they call victimhood. That as good, kind, caring parents, it's very natural, and it's actually a good thing, it's a very natural thing, that when our kids are upset about something in school, something that didn't go well, socially, something with a teacher, something with a friend, something of feeling left out, something in camp, something of not getting into this place or that place, or whatever it is that didn't go their way, it's very natural for us from a place of deep love to be very validating and very empathetic to our child. And halavai, as we say, that we should always be that way, right? That's a great thing, that we should have that kind of empathy and validation. But if it stops there, we communicate implicitly to our child that they're kind of just a victim in this world. And that whatever is going on, we can be emotionally validating to them, but whatever is going on, there's just kind of a sense of victimhood. There's a book that I'm not particularly fond of, but it has some important truths. I think it was really a missed op. I think she might be from LA.
It was from right here.
Really? Oh gosh, did I not say this?
You can
The
say
book Bad Therapy. Anyone read this book? Yeah? I was very upset about it, but I'll tell you why I was upset about it. I'm upset about the book because I think she blew the opportunity. Because she actually has some really important points to make. But she goes so extreme that it just kind of loses all its validity because it's so overblown. But there are important truths. So to me, it's just such a shame. But one of the important truths that she has in that book is this point. Her book is about how we are over-therapizing our children nowadays and people in general. And what she means by that is that we are over-validating, over-emotionally coddling. And one of the, I don't know if she uses this exact language, but one of the ramifications of that is that now a person develops a sense of fundamental victimhood. Anything that happens to me, the entire experience is now how sorry I feel for myself, how sorry people feel for me. There isn't anything I can do. I can just sit in my emotions. I can sit in my feelings. People will come and give me a hug. We'll talk about self-care. We'll talk about comfort. We'll talk, all that. I'll watch all the TikTok videos on how to make myself feel better when someone hurts me. And what we're doing is we're increasing a sense of victimhood. And we're not empowering people to realize that whether or not what happened is your fault has nothing to do with fault. And I think that's important because I think that's why the pendulum swung. The reason we shifted so much into this culture of the validating and the empathizing and the therapizing and all of that is because it used to be, at some point in time, on the other extreme. It was like, what's wrong with you? Just get over it. Or, you shouldn't have done that. Or, you shouldn't put yourself in that situation. Or don't be such a victim to bullies. Like, the bully always picks on the kid with who wears their emotion on their sleeve. Just toughen up and then they won't pick on you. These kinds of sentiments. And now the pendulum, as it always does, it swung to the opposite side. But in doing that, we're missing the very precious duality and in-between place of being able to hold that dialectic, hold that duality, that it's not your fault. You didn't necessarily create this. It's not about blame. I can be here and sit with you in the feelings. I can validate. I can empathize. I can help take care of you. And what can you do about the situation? What can you do differently next time? How could you respond? Not because it's your fault, but because we want it to be better for you. And there's always something you can do. We talk about emunah, faith in God. The word emunah is related to the word uman, which means a craftsman. What's a craftsman? Someone who gets raw material. They receive the raw material. They don't create the raw material. They receive the raw material, and they mold it, they sculpt it into something. We get the raw material of what's going on around us. We don't have the capacity to control that. But what we do have is the ability to mold it. How do we respond to the situations around us? It's not necessarily our fault, but what can we do differently? There's like the serenity prayer in the 12 steps, if you're familiar with it. It's a beautiful prayer. It says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It's not a simple thing at all to do any of those three parts. The serenity to accept the things I can't control, the courage to change the things I can, and to know which is which. It's very, very challenging. But when our kids come home all the time and complain about this kid and this teacher and that teacher and this club and this clique and this environment, how do we respond to them? Do we respond to them in a way that's kind and caring and also asks them to look at, well, what's your role in it? What could you do differently? How are you responding? Stephen Covey points out the word responsibility is responsibility. What's your ability to respond? A young child, the reason why certain people have responsibility and others don't is based on how much ability they have to respond. A baby does not have ability to respond. So we don't ascribe to them any amount of responsibility for when they make a mess on the floor or whatever it is, because they have no ability to respond. As a child starts to get a little bit older, they have a little bit more ability to respond, so we hold them to have some responsibility. And as we get older and older and older, more and more. And so depending on the age of your child, there's a wide range of parents here, but as they get older, and certainly as they're starting to hit 6th, 7th, 8th grade for sure, by the time we're getting to 7th and 8th grade, for sure, I would say 5th, 6th starts to be like the tipping point. The younger years, we should already be starting to do this, right? Like up until 3rd, 4th grade is like we already should be starting this, but more in a gentle way. 5th, 6th grade is, I would say, almost like the beginning of transitioning. By the time we get to 7th, 8th grade, we need to be ascribing the ability to respond to our children. We need to be validating them, but also saying, and what can you do differently? Otherwise, we are really handicapping them because we're setting them up for that victim mentality as opposed to what the Islanders call that internal locus of control. That a person has an internal locus of control to impact and influence the environment around them. That's the third. The fourth. How long have I been going? Everyone okay?
Yeah.
Yeah? Am I putting everyone to sleep? It's late? Okay. The fourth is discipline. How do we discipline children? So, some people don't discipline at all. That creates a lot of entitlement. Some people overly discipline. That creates a lot of rebellion. How do we discipline appropriately? This is a talk into itself, and I don't know the answer, so we have to bring somebody else in. And when you bring that person in, please let me know, because I will come back, but as a listener, not a speaker. So, but I want to share with you something that the Alleners found. The Alleners found this, and I found it very interesting and very sobering for me as a parent who does have the capacity to get angry. The Alleners found that the homes that raised altruistic children had discipline. Parents disciplined, and parents got angry when they disciplined. But the anger always had three features that were distinct from the families that did not raise altruistic children. Number one, the anger was proportionate to what happened. It was in response to something that happened. It wasn't out of nowhere. I'm kind of merging two other things together, right? Number one is that, leave aside proportionate for a second, let me back up. Number one is that it was in response to something that happened. It wasn't that the parent came home from work in a bad mood and therefore just erupted because they were in a bad mood, or they were stressed because some deal they were working on didn't go through, or because they were stuck in traffic for an hour and a half and whatever was going on, and now they lost their temper, or because, I don't know, they're an alcoholic. And it wasn't that. In the families of the non-altruistic children, they either had no discipline, or the discipline was anger that wasn't related to something that happened. It was just the parent exploding in anger. That was number one. Number two, so again, in the altruistic families, it was anger that was in response to something. Number two, it was proportionately response. Meaning, if there was something that was really egregious, there could be more of a response. If there was something more minor, it was less of a response. But the anger was actually relating to the, so number one, something happened, and number two, it was proportionate to what happened. It wasn't just outbursts of anger. And number three, and this is really important, the anger was about what happened, not about the person. Because that's the difference between productive shame and toxic shame. Toxic shame is that I did something wrong and I am wrong. I did something bad, I am bad. I now become identified as bad. And if the parent's anger is unadulterated anger, it's disproportionate, and it's directed at the person, at the person's identity. You are such a blank. You're always doing this. You're so entitled. You're so unappreciative. I do all this for you, and I take you on this amazing vacation, and the first thing happens, and you don't even appreciate anything, and you're always so unappreciative. And when are you going to learn to, and it's directed at the person's character. That's the anger that turns into very toxic shame for the child, and does not allow them to grow into being altruistic. Because now, who's going to be altruistic? They think of themselves as bad. They can't be altruistic. I'm bad. I'm a bad person. Versus anger that's about the behavior. This was not okay. This is not aligned with the values we believe in. Going to this friend's house when she said, you can't come if you bring this friend that you're friends with, and you ditched her and you went there, that's not something that we don't, that's not kindness. We don't do that. I would love for you to make a different choice next time. And even if it's angry, but it's about the behavior, not about the person. That's the difference. So they found that in the homes of either the bystanders or the enablers, there was either no discipline, which led to a lot of entitlement, or there was discipline with anger that led to shame, which led to a toxic sense of self. Versus those homes that developed altruistic children had discipline, but the discipline with anger, they even found, just by the way, I'm not in any way promoting this, I'm just saying this to make the point, because I think it's actually powerful, that actually in the homes of those who raised altruistic children, there was just as much physical form of discipline as there was, that the parents would hit their kids. But that the kids experienced that when my parent is hitting me, they are responding to something I did. It's a proportionate response, And it's not because they think ill of me, it's because they don't like what I did. And that recipe is so real, is so true, that even if it involved physical, it still carried through. Now, I'm not promoting that. I'm just saying it to make the point, right? That when we actually discipline, we hold our values, we communicate our values, and we show emotion, because go back to what we started with, it's good that we get passionate about something like that, because then our kids, the aliens, see that this actually means something to us. It's not just lip service, because, hey, dad or mom is actually angry about this. But the anger is in response to something, it's proportionate, and it's about what I did, not who I am. The last thing, and maybe the most important thing, is that they found that in the homes of those who raised altruistic children, there was a relationship between parent and child. And in the homes that didn't, there wasn't so much relationship. There was either profound levels of disconnect in terms of just neglect, or there may not have been neglect in terms of any physical needs, but there wasn't emotional connection, there wasn't closeness, there wasn't shared experience, there wasn't bonding. There wasn't the experience of, like I was describing before, of getting home and being asked any questions, even being asked, what did you get on your tests? But just being asked questions. Instead, there was getting home and everyone's busy. Everyone's doing something. Someone's making dinner, someone's on their phone, someone's out, someone's exercising, whatever it might be. But everyone's just too busy all the time, and we don't develop connection. That sense of connection is where everything comes from. Because if we want to have some discipline, if we want to convey our values to our children, the line goes, I think is, I don't know if it's his own, but Dr. Pelkovitz actually says this line, I heard from him, rules without relationships equal rebellion. Right? Rules without relationships equal rebellion, and no rules equals entitlement. So there needs to be those relationships. All of this stuff that I just described, them seeing your values, what you're passionate about, communicating care versus equity, communicating the internal locus of control versus victimhood, having that discipline, all of that can only exist when there's the container of actually having a relationship. Which means spending time together, it means doing things, it means knowing what's going on in life. Ask them questions. It's okay to even be a little bit, not too much, but a little bit prying. Like they give you one-word answers. Ask again. Keep asking. Be involved in their lives. Do things together. Now, as your kids get a little older, especially as they enter teenage years, it's very difficult to talk to kids and get any answers out of them. I highly recommend Dan Siegel's book on the teenage brain to understand why. I did an episode in my podcast about it if you want to listen to it. I think tried to express and articulate what it is that's happening in the teenage brain and why they are this way and how they need us to show up for them as parents. But I want to just give you one illustration of I think the book by Dan Siegel is called Brainstorm. I'm pretty sure if anyone wants to check it out. He does it. He explains it amazing from a neuroscientific perspective of what's happening in the teenage brain. It's really amazing. But I want to just give you one practical tip for talking to teens, which is don't try to have face-to-face conversations. I like to think about it as like tennis versus skiing. Don't play tennis with your teen when you're trying to talk about something. Go skiing. I love skiing. Go skiing. Okay? Don't play tennis. Go skiing. When you face a teenager head-on, you play tennis, you're trying to hit the ball to them, they do not want to engage with you. Do something that buffers the level of intimacy that you're creating and have the conversation. So do it while you're taking a drive. Do it while you're shooting around playing basketball. Do it while you're getting a manicure. Do it while you're going shopping. Do it while you're engaged in some other activity. I want to just share with you a beautiful story that I heard from a colleague of mine. She's a bit older than me, so she has older kids already. She told me this story when we were talking about this concept. She said she saw this in her own life in the most amazing way. We should all only be so fortunate as to experience something like this. She said, I love this, she said, when my son was a teen, I knew he wouldn't talk to me about anything. But I prioritized, I told myself, I'm going to have a relationship with my son. That is my priority. I'm going to find a way. So here's what she did. She said, she noticed that like every night at around 10:30, she would be like finishing up in downstairs and putting her things away, and she'd be ready to go off to bed. And just then, her son would kind of like stumble down the stairs and kind of just be around, hanging around. And so what she started to do was, and she would already be going to sleep, so she would already leave. She noticed that. So she decided, you know what, I'm going to be tired, but my priority is to have a relationship with my teenage son. So I'm going to find a way. So here's what she did. She says she stocked her pantry with mixes for pumpkin muffins or whatever, some sort of muffins. And every time this happened, every so often, when her son would come downstairs and she would hear him coming down the stairs, she would quickly, even though she had just cleaned up everything in the kitchen, she would quickly take out a box of pumpkin muffin mix and she would say, oh, Jake, I was just about to make pumpkin muffins. Can you keep me company? And she would start making the muffins, and he's sitting there, and she's doing something, so it's not tennis. And along the way, he would start to tell her something about something at school, and something on the team, and something with the guys, and something with the girls, and he would start to tell her about things. And they had conversations. And he said, and she told me, years later, he was 27 years old. This is when he was a teen. And 27 years old, years later, he was dating a girl seriously for the first time. And they were in a serious relationship, and she called him, and he called his mom. And he was like choking up, and he said, all those years, I thought you were actually making pumpkin muffins. Because I just told my girlfriend about all the times we had these deep talks while you were making pumpkin muffins. And how I have the best mom ever, and she's like my best friend. Because we used to just bond over pumpkin muffins. She was always making, and he said, and my girlfriend looked at me and she was like, why was your mom always making pumpkin muffins? And he said, I never thought about that. I don't know. And then it hit him. You weren't making pumpkin muffins. You were trying to make sure you had a relationship with me. So we have to build relationships with our kids in one way or another. We have to find a way, because none of the other things are even possible if there isn't the initial container of having a relationship. So just to bring all of this practically, we need to start small. We're all so overburdened. We have so many things going on. We can't revamp the entirety of our lives. But we can think about, what questions do we ask our kids? What questions do we ask them on a consistent basis? What do our questions communicate what we really care about? What do we show them passion about? What do they hear us talking about? If you want to bring this into your family's life, model it. I know someone who decided they were going to take on, and they did this because they wanted their kids to see it as a family. They weren't putting it on their kids. They weren't telling their kids to do anything. But they decided, I'm making for myself a campaign for my birthday. They turned 40, my 40th birthday. I'm doing a year of doing an act of kindness every day for my 40th birthday. And my family knows about it. I'm not telling them to do anything, because the kids don't want to be told to do something. But they're seeing that that's how mom is celebrating her 40th birthday. She's celebrating it by saying, that's what I want to do. I want to do an act of kindness every day for the year. It could be through a Dvar Torah we say at the Shabbos table is a great opportunity, because it doesn't have to be preaching. But say a story, say an idea on the Parsha. There's so many resources out there for people to get access to information and ideas, and you can Google anything, kindness in Parshas Vayishlach, and do that every week, and have it that every week you're sharing something that revolves around kindness, because we need to teach our kids kindness. Chores are so important and such a lost art. Kids should be doing chores. Kids need to be doing chores. It's a whole other topic. I know I'm talking for too long, so I'm not. But kids should be doing chores. Find a way to have your kids doing chores. It doesn't have to be that on a consistent weekly basis there's a specific routine. That's great. It doesn't have to be that. It could just be that that when they finish dinner, it's make sure to clear your spot. And even if there's help at home to take care of it, don't let that make it that now kids have no responsibility. Because they need to feel a sense of responsibility. They need to feel a sense that what I do actually matters to something. If everything is taken care of me, the message they start to receive is nothing I do has impact on the world around me. Kindness, altruism, comes from the recognition that the things I do actually make an impact around me. So something as simple as it was helpful to mom that I cleared the table, that shows me that my choice has an impact. right? Chores, doing chores. And again, the last thing, the pumpkin muffin story, making sure that we find ways to prioritize having time for our kids, spending time with them. Life is very busy. It's not easy. Like I said, all of this is something that I need to hear again and again and again. Because if you came to my house, I don't know that anything would look like anything I just said. But to try our best to think about it. And hopefully, as I started, hopefully we can all have the nachas, the real deep, deep pleasure in life of feeling that if our kid was in a situation like the Israeli soldiers in the story I started with, not that should ever have to happen to anybody or anything like that, but that I know that my kid would think of doing that. That's the ultimate nachas we can have. So Hashem should help us that all of our efforts and all the commitment that we all make to try and raise children in this way should all come to fruition and bring all of us deep, deep satisfaction and pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Oh, if anybody wants, there are books here for sale. There's like a page on the table over there that has Venmo or Zelle information. If anybody wants, please help yourself. Thank you. I'll be here for you. Yeah.
Anyone has any questions?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And yeah, this infographic is also